Now, if you want to learn more about porgs and really every other little detail in The Last Jedi, they put out a brand new visual dictionary. They've done one of these for The Force Awakens. They've done them for all the prequels individually. Here is the very first one they made, which unfortunately is the entire trilogy in one book. I really hope at some point we get like an expanded version.
Yeah.
This was my exact one that I think I got in 7th grade and have used to make lots and lots of lightsaber fan art and pictures of Figrin Dan and all that kind of stuff. But the new book is really gorgeous, really fantastic. It's written by Pablo Hidalgo, who's kind of in charge of the Star Wars story group and figuring out what everything is. And yeah, it's just incredibly like detailed photos of props, costumes, just little background things, which are really, that's the thing I've always liked about Star Wars the most. And I feel like The Last Jedi really managed to deliver on having all kinds of stuff to look at.
Yeah, I really love these books. Just like you, I have all of them, even the ones for the prequels, because I think that the cool thing about them is that A, shows you how a lot of the props were sort of made, or at least you can kind of surmise from that. But like, there's Snoke's shoes, right? We know he wears them in the movie, but have you ever seen the pattern on them?
I also love like they'll have sort of flavor text that you really don't need to know. This is, Snoke's painful stance has caused him to prioritize comfort. Yes, that is literally why people wear slippers, because they are comfortable. It's just a very elaborate way of saying that.
It also shows like really cool weapons, character names of like background characters you didn't think you knew about, high-res pictures of all the cool Praetorian Guard swords and weapons. But also specifically, it shows you contextually in the galaxy where things are happening. It shows you environments. It shows you, weird little items like Luke's fishing nets.
Yeah, and occasionally it'll be stuff from scenes that we didn't even get in the full movie, like all of the island visitors who are the male version of the caretakers. Basically, you've got a weird balance in this culture between nuns and fishermen, and the fishermen have shore leave and they come over and they do all kinds of weird, probably fish stuff. I don't really know. They play like trumpets. They play the opa bladder bagpipes. Star Wars is weird, man, but I'm so glad they're continuing to make these books. If you missed the old ones, you can get them used super cheap on Amazon or eBay or wherever. So that's super fun. On that note, another thing about the background details I've always loved is the short story collections. This is Tales from the Mos Eisley Cantina, which is basically little short stories about all of the background characters in A New Hope. They are still continuing that tradition, and here's a brand new one about the Canto Bight scene, the whole casino sequence in The Last Jedi. And it's taking these effectively just nonsense, irrelevant background characters and giving them entire stories. They're fairy tales.
Yeah.
They're fun little adventures, and I love that they're continuing to do that. So it's kind of cool that
like you see like this sort of like half-headed alien like rolling the dice or gambling or hanging out at the back of that casino, and you're like, whatever, he's cool. What's his name? You can find out his name and you can read an entire story about him. Yeah. The cool thing about these books is that they are brisk. They are like short and fun stories.
Yeah.
And, a lot of the old ones, like Tales from Jabba's Palace was one of my favorite books growing up because it gave Malakili, the Rancor Keeper, sort of justification for why specifically he cried when the Rancor died, and it's because he had a bond with that animal for like a young age.
Canto Bight's a little bit longer form. I think it's like a shorter book overall, but I think it's only like 4 novellas that they did.
Interesting.
They did one for Force Awakens, but in a really weird roundabout way, where they put out a handful of short stories as ebooks.
Yeah.
And then they released a collection edition after the fact. But as far as getting like a book you can have on your shelf, it was a little bit more roundabout.
Yeah, I really like that. They did like a story about one of the characters in Maz Kanata's castle from The Force Awakens. And like the ebook's like $2 and it's a really brisk read and I really like that.
Find out the story about Constable Zuvio.
Last but not least, I've been really geeking out about this book. I buy these every year. I've been collecting the Art of Star Wars books ever since the Ralph McQuarrie ones that came out for the original trilogy that were remastered for the special editions, kind of like the special editions were, where they added extra scenes and extra passages and paragraphs and stuff like that. These books are gorgeous. They give you a really good rundown of sort of scene by scene, exactly the mentality and the methodology that was going into the creation of this stuff. This one specifically, I think is better than the last few books because you get a lot more hand-drawn stuff. There's a lot more sort of like sketchy characters. You get to see like what porgs look like. Here's like them just being like, well, you see a helmet on a medical or on a droid for half a second in the scene. Here's like 70 of them,
Yeah, so, and presumably Rian Johnson had to come in and be like, I like that one.
Yeah, it's also got a foreword by Rian Johnson, which is just a really great read. But most importantly, it gives you sort of the, here's how they came up with like all the different like sort of round droids that we've got over here, right? Like, and there's a whole bunch of different ones. So again, if you like this movie a lot and you want a deeper dive on it, these are the 3 books I think that you should get. from art to extra stories to high-res scans of all of the different weapons and characters in the film.
So really interesting thing you were telling me about this was that they go into a little bit the end of Force Awakens, because they put out a version of this for Force Awakens, but they had to kind of hide some of the big plot points, like Han dying. So that got put into this one, presumably. Some of the kind of the big twisty stuff will show up in episode 9, yeah?
Yeah, if you keep talking, I'm gonna see if I can pull
Also,
it up.
it smells really terrible. I think they literally just printed these. I was like trying to read this in bed the other night, but I was getting just like a headache from the fumes.
It is a stinky book.
They're very stinky books. We like the books as far as what's in them, but like Febreze them or something.
So this shot they had to hide. Can we get a shot of this? They had to hide this from the last book because in case the book came out early, but this is Kylo Ren killing Han Solo. And this is so Ralph McQuarrie. Like, I love the helmet design. Han's jacket's super cool in that. It's a little different than the one we saw in the film. I love the holster on the side of him. He's dropping his famous gun.
These concept art things are always cool because they're very much like what if and what almost was. The Force Awakens one has a whole thing about how like originally Rey was living on an aquatic planet and was like scavenging for stuff underwater. So it was like kind of this whole Waterworld vibe to it.
You learn stuff from these books also, like the Canto Bight scene, the casino area, or casino zone, as we've been calling it. In the new film, it was originally supposed to be Poe and Finn on an adventure, and instead they took Poe out and wrote in Rose, and Rose was the original title code word for Maz Kanata's character, based on a high school art teacher that two of the main people in the new Star Wars movies both shared like a generation apart.
Oh, weird.
Chewie, it belongs in a museum. That was our video about Star Wars. Man, we've made a lot of videos about Star Wars, so here's some more videos about Star Wars. Right, Greedo? That's not how he talks. Have a good Christmas.